On Christmas night inside the warm kitchen after the party, I saw my daughter-in-law crack a blue capsule into my wife's milk. In the living room, 30 guests were still laughing by the fireplace. She stirred, the glass smiled and whispered, "Drink it all, Mom." I made it myself. I didn't scream. I didn't stop her. I quietly switched the glass. Then she turned her head. Her eyes locked on mine, and the smile on her lips suddenly vanished. Take a breath with me. Quick pause before we start. Leave a comment. Have you ever had to protect someone you love from a threat you couldn't talk about? Yes or no? Your perspective might help someone else today. Some elements have been adjusted for storytelling. The lesson protecting what matters most is what I hope stays with you. I watched the small blue capsule slip from my daughter-in-law's manicured fingers and dissolve instantly into my wife's warm milk. But let me start 3 hours earlier when the Christmas party was just beginning, and I still thought I understood my family. My name is Leonard Caldwell, 67 years old, and I have spent 40 years turning 2 acres into 300, building a dairy farm my grandfather would recognize and my father would be proud of. The farmhouse held 30 guests that December evening. Lawyers, bankers, neighbors. Snow fell heavy outside the windows. Florence, 66, sat in her wheelchair near the fireplace. Her hands thin from chemotherapy, but still capable of holding the cup of warm milk that would nearly kill her. The doctors had paused her treatment 3 weeks earlier. They'd said her body needed rest. She'd been getting sicker, not better. Clayton, 36, stood near the punch bowl, in his pressed flannel shirt, looking more like a corporate manager than a farmer, which was exactly what he wanted to be. My son had never loved the land the way I did. I'd accepted that. But I'd thought he at least loved his mother. Margot, 34, moved through the Christmas guests with practiced grace, her smile warm as she carried drinks. She'd married Clayton 7 years ago, and for the first few years, she'd been careful with everything: the family china, the old traditions, even the way she spoke to Florence. Respectful, almost timid. That woman was gone. Dwight Prescott, 58, our family attorney for 15 years, stood by the window discussing estate law with a banker unaware of the debt he would soon help me collect. Retired federal judge Ernest Thornton, 72, sat in the corner armchair, nursing bourbon, watching the room with patient eyes. Marvin Harrington, 54, our senior farmhand for 22 years, stood awkwardly near the food table in his Sunday flannel. Buster, the 11-year-old farm dog, lay near the fireplace, but lifted his head and released a low, warning bark each time Margot passed behavior I had never witnessed in all his years. He'd slept through thunderstorms. He'd never growled at family. But tonight, every time Margot walked by with her tray, Buster's ears went flat and that low rumble came from his throat. Florence noticed. "What's gotten into him?" she asked. "Don't know," I said, but I was starting to. Margot leaned toward a neighbor, voice sweet. "I just want to take care of them. They've worked so hard for so long." Florence had mentioned earlier that Margot insisted on the catering. She said my cooking was too plain for this crowd. I'd heard Clayton talking to the banker too. Voice low, but not low enough. "Dad's slowing down. We're discussing transition plans for the spring." Transition plans. For a farm I still woke at 5 every morning to run. When did the daughter-in-law, who once asked permission to touch the family china, start deciding who belonged at our table? The party rolled on. Guests laughed. The fire crackled. Florence looked tired but content, and I told myself I was imagining things. Old man getting paranoid. Then I walked toward the kitchen to refill the ice bucket. I paused in the hallway shadow. Through the doorway, I saw Margot alone at the counter, pulling a small blue capsule from her dress pocket. She popped it open with a practiced thumb flick, quick, efficient, like she'd done it 100 times, and dumped white powder into a glass of warm milk sitting on the counter. The milk Florence drank every night. The milk Margot had insisted on preparing personally for the past 2 months. She stirred it with the silver spoon. 3 rotations. Lifted the spoon and tapped it twice against the rim. Then she smiled at the glass. Not a warm smile. Not the smile you give something you're caring for. It was the smile I'd seen on men's faces when they thought they'd gotten one over on me in a cattle deal. Satisfied, predatory. She turned toward the living room, glass in hand, and I pressed myself flat against the wall, my heart hammered. 40 years of reading weather soil and men who tried to cheat me crystallized into cold calculation. This wasn't confusion. This was an accident. This was attempted murder. Margot walked past me close enough I could smell her expensive perfume, nothing like the soap Florence had used for 40 years. She didn't see me in the shadow. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. The most dangerous thing on this farm wasn't the bull in the north pasture. It was the woman walking through my house. I'd been so busy loving Florence that I stopped protecting her. And then it hit me sharp and cold as January wind. Florence's mysterious symptoms. 7 weeks of nausea, dizziness, blood pressure drops that sent us to the emergency room twice. The doctors had blamed the chemotherapy, but they'd been confused. These reactions are unusual, they'd said. Severe for her dosage. Florence only got violently ill on the days Margot was home. On the days Margot prepared her drinks. The chemo had been paused 3 weeks ago. Florence should have been getting better. She was getting worse. Margot's practiced thumb motion. The way she'd stirred exactly 3 times. This wasn't improvisation. This was routine. This wasn't the first poisoning. I stood frozen in that hallway as Margot walked back into the living room, carrying the poisoned milk toward Florence. My mind raced backward, worse only on Margot's home days, better when she was away visiting her mother in Iowa for those 10 days in November. The pattern had always been there. I just hadn't wanted to see it. Now I had 5 minutes to decide. Scream, confront, call the police, and lose all evidence. Margot would claim the capsule was a vitamin. Florence's blood tests would show nothing by tomorrow. I'd look like a paranoid old man. Clayton would defend his wife. The lawyers would take the farm while I was declared incompetent. Or I could play the long game, save Florence tonight, gather evidence, build the case, protect everything we'd built. Margot reached Florence's wheelchair, and I stepped out of the shadows. I had 5 seconds to save my wife's life without letting the woman who was killing her know I was watching. Margot, honey. I called out, stepping from the hallway shadow with a measured elderly shuffle. Did you see where I put my arthritis pills, getting old and forgetful? She turned startled, the glass of poisoned milk still in her hand. Her eyes flashed irritation for a fraction of a second before the mask returned. Leonard, you startled me, she said, voice sharp. Watch where you're going. I moved toward her with the careful gait of a man whose knees hurt the walk I'd perfected over the past year whenever Clayton and Margot were watching. Made them think I was declining faster than I was. Let them get confident. Marine Corps taught me a long time ago, when the enemy underestimates you, you're already halfway to winning. I bumped her shoulder as I passed controlled collision, precise angle, exactly the way we'd practiced disarming techniques in combat training 47 years ago. Not hard enough to spill, just enough to make her look down at her expensive dress, checking for damage. 3 seconds. That's all I had. My hands moved with muscle memory older than my son. Left hand steadied the clean milk glass sitting on the side table near the hallway. Right hand lifted it. Both hands brought it to my chest while my body blocked Margot's sightline. The poisoned glass she'd been holding was now tucked against my ribs inside my jacket. The clean glass was in my hand, extended toward her. Sorry, I muttered, pressing the safe glass toward her. These old hands shake. You better take this to Florence before I drop it. Margot glanced down once more at her dress, found no stain, then took the glass from my hand, without really looking at it. She was already turning toward the living room, her mind on the performance she was about to give. "Here you go, Mom," I heard her say, voice dripping sweetness. "I warmed it just how you like it. Drink it all down." I stood in the hallway, the poisoned milk cold against my ribs, and watched through the doorway as Florence smiled up at her daughter-in-law. "You're so good to me," Florence said. Margot's hand rested on Florence's shoulder. Gentle, loving, the hand of someone who cared. How many times had I watched Florence praise Margot's kindness while the poison was already working in her bloodstream? I turned and walked toward the warehouse, nodding at guests as I passed. Just the old farmer checking on the furnace. Nothing unusual. Nobody paid attention to me these days. That was the point. The farm office sat in the back corner of the warehouse behind the equipment storage. The door had a lock only I had the key to. I'd installed it myself in 1985 when we expanded operations, and I needed secure space for financial records. Clayton had asked for a key once. I'd told him I lost the spare. I hadn't. I locked the door behind me and removed the glass from my jacket. My hands were steady. They'd been steady when I executed the switch, and they were steady now. Fear comes before action, or after, never during. The Marines taught me that too. I pulled latex gloves from the desk drawer. I keep them for handling livestock medications, and carefully poured a sample of the poisoned milk into a specimen jar. Labeled it with date, time, and source. Sealed the original glass in a Ziploc bag with the same notation. Both went into the fireproof cabinet behind the false panel I'd built during the farm expansion. The panel looked like part of the wall. Clayton had been 14 when I installed it. He'd watched me work and never noticed. Evidence without chain of custody is just an accusation. The Corps taught me to document everything, trust nothing. I sat down at the desk and opened Florence's medical journal, the log her doctor had requested she keep, to track her symptoms during treatment. She'd been diligent about it. Florence was always diligent. I read November 3rd. Margot made lunch, so dizzy afterward I couldn't stand. She sat with me for hours, so kind. November 10th. Margot brought me soup for dinner. Felt nauseated all night. She stayed in the guest room to check on me. Such a blessing. November 17th. Margot prepared my morning tea. Terrible stomach cramps. She drove me to the ER. Don't know what I'd do without her. 7 weeks of entries. Each one praising Margot's care. Each one describing symptoms of chemical poisoning in Florence's own shaky handwriting. I whispered to the empty office. She sat with you to watch you suffer, to make sure it was working. The pattern was undeniable once you saw it. Florence only got violently ill on days Margot was home, on days Margot prepared her food, her drinks, her evening milk. The 10 days in November when Margot visited her mother in Iowa, Florence had no severe symptoms. The doctors had been puzzled. They'd thought maybe the chemo was having delayed reactions. It wasn't the chemo. I looked at the desk calendar. January 2nd was circled in red ink. Not my handwriting. I opened the desk drawer. Guardianship papers. Already filled out, needing only doctor and judge signatures. 2 sets, one for Florence Caldwell, declaring her unable to make medical decisions due to cognitive decline from illness and treatment. One for Leonard Caldwell, declaring him unable to make financial decisions due to age-related cognitive impairment. Clayton's signature was already at the bottom as petitioning family member. Margot's signature as supporting witness. Dated January 2nd, 2023, 6 days from now. They were going to institutionalize both of us. Take the farm. Take everything 3 generations had built. And they'd planned it down to the day, down to the signatures, down to the story they'd tell the judge about how concerned they were, how they'd tried everything, how heartbreaking it was to take this step. 6 days. They had 7 weeks to plan my wife's death. I had 6 days to prove it. I locked the papers back in the drawer, turned off the office light, and stood in the darkness, looking through the small window at the farmhouse lights. The party was still going. Guests were still laughing. Florence was still drinking her safe milk, believing her daughter-in-law loved her. And somewhere in that warm house, Margot was probably smiling. The first battle was won. But the war had just begun, and the enemy had no idea they'd been compromised. I had spent 41 years learning to read my wife's face, but I never learned to see the poison that was slowly erasing it. 11 o'clock Christmas Eve. The party guests were gone. I sat in the bedroom chair watching Florence sleep, her breathing shallow but steady. The poisoned milk was locked in my office. The guardianship papers were in the desk drawer. 5 days and 17 hours until they planned to file. I had time. Not much, but enough. If I was smart. If I was careful. I closed my eyes and forced myself to reconstruct the past 7 weeks. Not what I'd told myself, that Florence was having unusual reactions, that the doctors were monitoring it. What actually happened? The pattern I hadn't wanted to see. September 28th. Florence violently ill after Margot made soup. October 12th. Severe dizziness after Margot stayed home making lunch. October 19th, 26th. November 2nd, 9th, 16th. All Margot's days off work. All days Florence collapsed. But October 5th, October 20th, November 4th. Those were days Margot visited her mother in Rochester. Gone for 10 hours. On those days, Florence felt stronger, ate full meals, walked to the mailbox, laughed at dinner. The doctors called it inconsistent chemo reactions. Unusual but not unheard of. Treatment affected everyone differently. I remembered the last appointment. November 30th. The doctor had been concerned about Florence's declining condition. Leonard, he'd said, we're pausing treatment for 6 weeks. Let her body recover. The side effects should stop within days. 3 weeks ago. The chemo had been paused 3 weeks ago. The symptoms didn't stop. December 3rd. Florence had said, I'm still so dizzy, Leonard. Margot made me soup today. She's such a good daughter. December 10th. December 17th. Christmas Eve. Every time Margot prepared food, Florence got worse. The chemo had nothing to do with it. The chemo had never been the problem. I whispered to my sleeping wife. The symptoms didn't stop because they were never from the chemo. I was so busy hoping you'd get better, I didn't see you were being murdered. How many times had I watched my son kiss his mother's forehead while the poison he approved was working through her bloodstream? I couldn't sit anymore. The rage was building in my chest like water behind a dam. If I stayed in that room, I'd wake Florence. If I stayed in the house, I'd walk down the hall to the guest bedroom and do something that would destroy any chance of proving what they'd done. I pulled on my coat and boots and walked out into the December cold. The barn was dark and freezing. My breath came out in white clouds. I grabbed tools I didn't need to fix equipment that wasn't broken. I needed my hands busy. I needed the cold air. That's when the memory surfaced. The one I'd buried. The one I'd told myself I'd misunderstood. October evening, 2 months ago. I'd come in from evening milking around 7, boots muddy. The kitchen door was closed. Voices came through the wood. Not loud, but clear enough. Margot's voice. We just need to help the process along a little. The doctors say she has 6 months, maybe 8. We can't wait that long. The property taxes are due in January, and your father will never sell the North 40 while she's alive to argue. I'd frozen in the hallway. Told myself I was hearing things. They were discussing medical options, care facilities, something reasonable. Then Clayton spoke. His voice quiet but steady. Not shocked. not horrified, just practical. "How much are we talking about?" he said. "And how long until nobody would question it?" Not, "That's horrible." Not, "We can't do that." Just, "How much?" Like he was negotiating the price of hay. I turned and walked away that night. Went back to the barn. Told myself I'd misheard. My son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, taught to milk cows, taught to check fence lines, couldn't be discussing his mother's murder like a business transaction. I'd been lying to myself. I stood in the freezing barn with a wrench in my hand and spoke to the empty darkness. "I heard you. I heard you agree to kill your mother for property taxes, and I walked away because I couldn't believe my own son was capable." That ends today. The most dangerous predator isn't the one born cruel. It's the one you raised with your own hands who chooses cruelty anyway. Clayton wasn't Margot's victim. He wasn't being manipulated or slowly corrupted. 2 months ago, before Florence's last good day, he'd asked, "How much and how long until nobody would question it?" He hadn't asked if they should do it. He'd negotiated terms. The property taxes. The north 40 acres. We'd argued about that land for 2 years. Clayton wanted to sell it to a development company. 40 acres at the edge of the farm. They were offering $200,000. Clayton said it was smart business. Florence had refused. That land had been in her family before we married. Her grandfather's homestead. She'd told Clayton over Sunday dinner in September, voice firm despite the weakness. "When I'm dead, you can do whatever you want with it. While I'm alive, it stays farmland." She'd meant it as a joke. Dark humor about her own mortality. Clayton had taken it as a timeline. Dawn was breaking over the snow-covered fields. Christmas morning. I could see the farmhouse from the barn door, smoke rising from the chimney. Somewhere in there, my son was sleeping next to the woman who'd been poisoning his mother. He wasn't haunted. He wasn't conflicted. He was waiting for property taxes to come due in January, so he could sell 40 acres for $200,000. 5 days and 17 hours until they filed papers to institutionalize both of us. I wasn't just fighting to save Florence. I was fighting my own son. And he'd stopped being my son the moment he agreed to murder for money. Who do you call when you need to prove your own son is trying to kill your wife and steal everything you've built over 40 years? I sat in my pickup truck parked in the warehouse at 6 o'clock Christmas morning. The cab was freezing. My breath came out white. The farmhouse was visible through the windshield lights, still off, everyone sleeping. I'd walked out here where no one could hear me through walls. My phone showed Judge Ernest Thornton's cell number. Saved for 20 years. Never used. I'd always figured if I ever needed a judge's personal line, something had gone terribly wrong. Something had gone terribly wrong. I dialed. He answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the hour. "Ernest," I said. "I need to tell you something I never thought I'd say. My son is poisoning my wife." Silence for 3 seconds. Then, "How long have you known?" 12 hours. But the pattern goes back 7 weeks. And Ernest, he's not being manipulated. He chose this. "Tell me everything," I told him. The capsule, the switch, Florence's journal, the chemo being paused while symptoms continued. Clayton's October conversation with Margot about property taxes and timelines. The guardianship papers dated for filing in 6 days. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "I know a lab that runs Christmas Day," he said finally. "Private, discreet, court-admissible chain of custody. Send me the sample tonight. I'll have preliminary results by December 27th. You believe me?" "Leonard, we've known each other 30 years. "Yes, I believe you." He paused. "And I've been watching your son at county planning meetings. He tried to push through a land sale variance 3 times this year without your signature. I wondered why he was so insistent. Now I know." For the first time in 12 hours, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. "I need more than the milk sample," I said. "I need documentary evidence, proof of conspiracy." "Nah, then find it," Ernest said. "But be careful. If they realize you know, they'll accelerate. And Leonard, don't confront them. Not yet. We build the case first." When does a father stop being a father and become a threat that must be neutralized? I hung up and watched the farmhouse. At 7:15, lights came on in the kitchen. At 7:25, I saw Clayton walk out the back door toward the north barns, checking equipment. 20-minute task. Maybe 25 in this cold. I walked to Clayton's office. He'd converted the old equipment shed into personal workspace 3 years ago. Insisted he needed privacy for farm financial planning. I'd thought it was reasonable. Now I wondered what he was planning in there that he didn't want me to see. I unlocked the door with the master key. The one I'd kept when Clayton asked for all copies. The one he didn't know existed. The office was neat. Computer on the desk, filing cabinets against the wall, calendar tacked to corkboard. I opened the top desk drawer. Farm financial reports, feed invoices, equipment maintenance schedules, normal things. Underneath them, thick manila folder labeled Legal Confidential. I opened it. Guardianship petitions. 2 of them. Professionally typed on legal letterhead. One for Florence Caldwell, age 66, citing progressive cognitive decline due to cancer treatment and underlying illness rendering respondent unable to make informed medical decisions. One for Leonard Caldwell, age 67, citing age-related cognitive impairment, memory loss, and inability to distinguish reality from delusion rendering respondent unable to manage financial affairs. Both notarized. Sharon Whitmore, notary public in Rochester, had signed and stamped them on December 15th, 10 days before Christmas. Before Florence's worst symptoms. Before I'd seen the capsule. They'd been planning this for weeks. 2 signature lines remained blank on each form. Attending physician and approving judge, stamped at the top in red ink. Filed court date January 2nd, 2024. 6 days from now. First business day after New Year. Paper clipped to the front, printed email. From Clayton Caldwell to Margot Caldwell. Date December 10th, 2023. Subject legal timeline. Papers ready. Doctor appointment scheduled December 27th for mom's evaluation. Judge contact TBD. Execute by January 2nd before dad realizes. Once filed, irreversible. I read it twice. Then I read it again. Execute by 1/2 before dad realizes. My son had written that. About me. About taking everything from me before I could understand what was happening. I looked at the petition language again. Respondents demonstrate advanced cognitive decline, memory loss, and inability to distinguish reality from delusion. He'd written that about his mother. While she was praising him for taking care of her. While she was thanking Margot for the soup that was making her dizzy. While she believed her family loved her. They spent weeks building the legal cage. I had 6 days to break it apart before the door locked forever. I checked the desk calendar. December 27th circled in red marker. Handwritten notation, 10 a.m., Dr. Reeves' mom evaluation for guardianship petition, get signature. Dr. Reeves. A physician Florence had never met. Chosen by Clayton specifically to evaluate a woman he'd been systematically poisoning. A doctor who would see Florence in her weakened state, review the medical history Clayton provided, and sign the paper declaring her incompetent. 2 days from now. Below the calendar notation in different handwriting, Margot's looping script, judge contact, try Whitfield. They were shopping for a judge who'd sign off quickly. Someone who wouldn't ask too many questions about why an entire family needed to be institutionalized at once. I pulled out my phone and photographed everything. The petitions, the email, the calendar, every page of the manila folder. Then I returned everything to exact position in the drawer and closed it. 22 minutes had passed. Clayton would be walking back from the north barn any moment. I locked the office door behind me and walked back to the warehouse. December 27th, 10 in the morning. They were taking Florence to a doctor who would evaluate her while poison was still working through her system. A doctor who would see confusion, weakness, memory problems, all the symptoms they'd deliberately caused, and declare her unable to make decisions. 6 days until they filed with the court. But first I needed to know where they planned to send us, because men who plan this carefully don't leave loose ends. And 2 parents who've been declared incompetent don't get to stay home on the farm they built. The email confirmation was dated November 10th, 2023, 6 weeks before Christmas, when my wife could still walk to the mailbox without help. I sat in the freezing warehouse office at 2 o'clock Christmas afternoon, going through the farm's shared email account on the old desktop computer. Clayton had set up the account 3 years ago for business correspondence. Farm suppliers, equipment vendors, bank communications. He'd insisted we all share the password for transparency. I was starting to understand what kind of transparency he'd been counting on. The email was from Sunset Ridge Memory Care in Rochester. Subject line, reservation confirmation, Caldwell. Dear Ms. Caldwell, it read. Thank you for your inquiry regarding long-term residential care. We are pleased to confirm reservation of 2 private rooms in our secure memory wing for January 2024 intake. 2 rooms, secure memory wing. January 2024. Monthly rate $8,400 per room. $16,800 total. Deposit required $5,000 paid via bank transfer from Caldwell Dairy Farm operating account. They'd used farm money, our farm money, to reserve the rooms where they planned to lock us away. I scrolled down, found the email thread. Margot's inquiry to the facility dated November 3rd, followed by detailed phone conversation notes she'd documented herself. Patient 1, female, age 66, early-stage dementia, wandering risk, requires 24-hour supervision, occasional confusion, and memory loss. Patient 2, male, age 67, cognitive decline related to age, financial mismanagement concerns, requires secured environment for safety. I read it twice, then I read the date again. November 10th, 2023. On November 10th, Florence had walked 3 miles with her church group. She'd made dinner for 12 people that night. She'd done the farm bookkeeping the next morning, caught an error in the feed invoice, negotiated a credit with the supplier. On November 10th, Florence could drive to town, could remember every conversation, could manage numbers better than I could. She wasn't wandering, she wasn't confused, she was healthy. You didn't book this because she was getting worse, I said to the computer screen. You booked it because you were about to make her worse. Margot had documented medical conditions that didn't exist yet, created a false history before the symptoms appeared, established the narrative before she started the poisoning. When the doctors saw Florence in December, confused, weak, unable to stand without help, they'd look at this November 10th documentation and think the decline had been progressing for weeks. They'd think it was natural. They'd think she needed professional care. How do you tell a dying woman that the angel sitting with her at 3 a.m. is the one who made her need comfort in the first place? I printed the email, folded it, put it in the manila envelope with the guardianship papers and the photos I'd taken from Clayton's office. The case was building, document by document, lie by lie. At 9 o'clock that night, I went to Florence's bedroom. She was resting after Christmas dinner, propped up on pillows, too tired to come downstairs for dessert. Margot had brought her a plate. Clayton had kissed her forehead and told her to rest. I sat in the chair beside the bed. How are you feeling? I asked. Tired, she said. But Margot made sure I ate something. She's so good to me. She makes you a lot of things, I said carefully. The drinks, The soup. How do you feel after? Florence looked at me with tired eyes. But they were firm. Certain. Ah, she loves me, Leonard. She's the only one who sits with me at 3 a.m. when the pain is unbearable. You're always asleep, but she comes in, gives me my vitamins, talks to me until the medicine works. Don't do this to her. My blood went cold. Well, what vitamins? The supplements she gets from Rochester. Special ones for cancer patients. She researched them herself. Florence's voice was defensive now. That's how much she cares. When I can't sleep, when the pain is so bad, I want to scream, she sits with me. She holds my hand. Don't punish her for being kind. Vitamins. Every morning for 2 months. A second poisoning method I'd never thought to look for. I don't remember any doctor prescribing vitamins, I said. Margot gets them from a pharmacy. She pays for them herself. Florence reached for my hand. Please, Leonard. I know you're struggling with Clayton wanting to help more with the farm. I know it's hard to let go. But don't take it out on Margot. She's been a blessing. I couldn't tell her. Not without proof. Not without scientific evidence that would hold up when Clayton's lawyers called me a paranoid old man trying to hold on to power. If I told her now tonight without evidence, I would destroy our marriage trying to save her life. She would choose them. She would testify against me at the guardianship hearing, and they would win. I kissed her forehead. I'm sorry. You're right. Get some rest. I turned off the lamp and sat in the chair in the darkness, watching her fall asleep. The hardest part of saving someone isn't the fight against the enemy. It's the moment when the person you're saving chooses to protect the enemy instead. Her breathing slowed, became steady, shallow but regular. I thought about the nursing home rooms booked 6 weeks early. The guardianship papers completed 15 days before Christmas. The vitamins I'd never seen tested. The 3 a.m. visits where Margot sat with Florence holding her hand while the poison she'd given that morning worked through Florence's system. Florence was sleeping now. Peaceful. Trusting. I leaned close to her ear and whispered a promise she couldn't hear. I will prove it. And when I do, I will not apologize for what I have to do next. Tomorrow I would start the war. They didn't know they were already fighting. But first I needed scientific proof of the poison. And I had 5 days left before they took Florence to a doctor who would declare her incompetent while the poison was still in her system. 5 days to prove my son was a murderer. 5 days to save the woman who wouldn't let me save her. I stood up from the chair and walked to the door. Before I left, I looked back at her one more time. She was smiling in her sleep, and I wondered if she was dreaming about Margot's kindness. The roads were empty at 5 a.m. on December 26th. Nothing but my headlights cutting through snow and the poisoned milk sample in a cooler on the passenger seat. 5 days. That's what I'd told myself last night watching Florence sleep. 5 days to prove my son was trying to kill his mother. Now I was driving through pre-dawn darkness to find out if I had any proof at all. The rest stop was 30 miles outside Rochester. Neutral location. No connection to the farm or anyone who might recognize me. Judge Thornton had given me the coordinates, told me to look for a white van parked near the truck scales. I found it at 5:15, pulled in next to it. A woman in her mid-40s stepped out wearing a heavy coat and carrying a leather folder. Dr. Rebecca Moss, independent toxicology consultant. Judge Thornton had said she ran the private lab he trusted for cases requiring discretion and court-admissible chain of custody. She climbed into my truck without introduction. The cab was warm. She opened the folder. "Standard panel is clean," she said. "No pleasantries, just facts. No arsenic, cyanide, strychnine, common sedatives, opiates, or pharmaceutical compounds." My chest went hollow. "So there's nothing." I didn't say that." She pulled out a printout covered in charts and numbers. Something metabolized in this milk that shouldn't be there. The breakdown signature suggests agricultural, chemical, pesticide, herbicide, veterinary medication class. Not pharmaceutical. That's why it's invisible on standard toxicology panel. How long for specialized analysis? 72 hours minimum. I need to run it against agricultural compound databases test for organophosphates, carbamates, specific veterinary drugs. Whatever they used, they knew what they were doing. This isn't amateur hour. 72 hours, 3 days. She handed me a receipt. Judge Thornton is covering the cost. Results will be court admissible. I'll have them by December 29th, 9 a.m. December 29th, one day after they were taking Florence to the doctor. She left. I sat in the truck cab with the engine running, staring at the empty highway. My phone rang. Ernest Thornton. Rebecca called me, he said. Can you wait until the 29th? That's the earliest we'll have results that will hold up in court. The doctor appointment is the 27th, I said. Tomorrow. They're taking Florence to get evaluated for the guardianship petition. If he signs that paper, they have what they need. Then you need to stop that appointment, Ernest said. Buy time. Whatever it takes. I hung up and drove back toward the farm. How do you prove a crime when the criminals have spent weeks erasing every trace, and you have 3 days before they complete the plan? I reached the farmhouse at 7. The sun was just starting to rise. Everyone was still asleep. I went straight to the kitchen. To the security camera system I'd installed 5 years ago when we expanded operations and started keeping more equipment on site. Wired cameras in key locations. DVR system in the utility closet. The kitchen camera was mounted above the sink. It should have been pointing toward the stove and counter where food was prepared. It was pointing toward the window. I opened the utility closet and checked the DVR display. Pulled up the system logs. December 1st, 2:14 a.m. User Clayton_admin. Camera 3 angle manually adjusted. Manual override approved. Clayton had requested admin access to the security system 3 months ago. Said he wanted to manage it more efficiently, check cameras from his phone handle maintenance. I'd given him the login. December 1st, 3 weeks before Christmas. I pulled out Florence's medical journal from my jacket pocket, the one I'd been carrying since I found it. Flipped to December 2nd. Yesterday evening, Margot made hot cocoa. Florence had written in shaky handwriting. I've never been so sick, vomiting all night. She stayed with me so devoted. December 1st was the first poisoning. And at 2:14 in the morning, while Florence was vomiting, while Margot was staying with her, Clayton was in the utility closet, adjusting the camera angle so it wouldn't record what happened at the counter. They'd poisoned her and erased the evidence the same night. Professional, careful, systematic. I stared at the tampered camera for a long time. Then I remembered something. The barn camera. 15 years ago, when copper theft was a problem in the county, I'd installed a security camera on the exterior barn wall facing the warehouse entrance, wired separately from the house system. Password protected with a code only I knew. I'd installed it myself, never put it on the main network, never mentioned it to anyone. Clayton didn't know it existed. I walked to my office in the warehouse, locked the door behind me. Opened my laptop, the old one I kept for farm records that predated Clayton's involvement. The barn camera feed was still active. Recording to local storage. 15 years of footage. I scrolled back to December 1st, 2023. Set the timeline to evening. 11:47 p.m. timestamp clear in the corner. Margot's SUV pulled up to the warehouse entrance. She got out carrying an empty canvas tote bag, the reusable kind from the grocery store. Flat, lightweight. She looked around, checking to see if anyone was watching. She didn't look up at the barn camera mounted 20 feet above her head. She walked into the warehouse, the storage section, where Clayton kept the agricultural supply cabinet. The door I'd left unlocked because it was our warehouse on our property used by our family. 6 minutes later, she emerged. Same canvas bag, now heavy and sagging at the bottom. The way a bag looks when it's carrying bottles. She glanced around again. The security light mounted above the warehouse door caught her face clearly. No question who it was. No question what she was removing. She walked back to her SUV and drove toward the main house. This was December 1st, the same night Clayton adjusted the kitchen camera at 2:14 a.m. The same night Florence first got violently ill from the hot cocoa. This was the night they began. They thought I was just a slow old farmer who wouldn't notice the cameras, wouldn't check the logs, wouldn't understand technology. That's the mistake that's going to cost them everything. I saved the footage to 3 separate drives, uploaded it to a cloud account Clayton had no access to, burned it onto 2 DVDs. Then I sat back and looked at the frozen frame. Margot's face in perfect clarity. The timestamp. December 1st, 11:47 p.m. 3 hours before Clayton adjusted the kitchen camera. 2 hours before Florence started vomiting from the hot cocoa Margot had made. They thought of everything except the camera I installed, when they were still pretending to love each other. Now I needed to find out what else they'd documented, what other lies they'd built, how deep Margot's fraud really went. Because if she was smart enough to choose agricultural poison that wouldn't show up on standard tests, she was smart enough to build a paper trail that made her look innocent. And I had 4 days to tear it apart. 11 phone calls in 4 months, all from my daughter-in-law to my wife's oncologist. And I'd never heard Florence mention a single one. I sat in my office at 2 in the afternoon with 6 months of landline phone bills spread across the desk. The barn camera footage was secured. 3 backup copies. Court-admissible chain of custody. But video of Margot taking something from the warehouse wasn't enough. I needed to prove what she took and what she did with it. The phone records told part of that story. August through December. 11 calls from our home number to Mayo Clinic Rochester Dr. Helen Vance's direct line. Florence's treating oncologist for 3 years. I pulled Florence's medical file from the cabinet, the one we kept at home with copies of all her treatment records. Started reading the doctor's notes from recent months. November 15th, entry jumped out. Family reports patient increasingly confused memory lapses, difficulty recognizing familiar faces. Daughter-in-law Margot Caldwell, primary caregiver, expresses growing concern about patient's cognitive decline. I checked Florence's test results from that same appointment. Montreal Cognitive Assessment. Score 28 out of 30, above average. Her best result in 6 months. I checked the phone log. November 15th, 2:47 p.m. 19-minute call to Dr. Vance's direct line. 2 hours after Florence proved she was sharp as ever, Margot called the doctor to report confusion and memory problems that didn't exist. I kept reading. October 8th. Family reports increased fatigue and disorientation. On October 8th, Florence had driven herself to church, led the book club meeting, and made dinner for 8 people. September 22nd. Caregiver notes patient experiencing severe mood swings and difficulty with basic tasks. On September 22nd, Florence had done the farm payroll, caught a math error I'd missed, and reorganized the entire pantry. Every entry in the medical file that mentioned family observations was followed by a phone call in the records. Margot wasn't updating the doctor on Florence's health. She was creating false documentation to support the guardianship petition. How do you fight an enemy who poisons not just the body, but the paperwork, who turns doctors into unwitting accomplices by feeding them lies disguised as concerned family updates? I photographed every page, every false report, every date that contradicted Florence's actual condition. Dr. Vance had documented it all in good faith, believing the daughter-in-law who called regularly was a devoted caregiver providing crucial information. She had no way to know Margot was systematically falsifying a medical history to make institutionalization look medically necessary. But I knew, and now I could prove it. A folded piece of paper appeared under my office door. I heard footsteps walking away. I opened it. Marvin's handwriting, need to talk. Private warehouse. I found him 10 minutes later standing in the cold warehouse away from the main house. Marvin Harrington, 54 years old, 22 years on this farm. Senior hand. Reliable. Quiet. I'd never known him to ask for a private conversation. "What is it?" I said. He looked older than usual. Tired. Like a man who'd been carrying something heavy for too long. 5 times, he said. Over the past 3 months. I've seen her in Mrs. Florence's bathroom, in the medicine cabinet. Margot? Yes, sir. When she thought nobody was home. I'd come in through the back for something tools supplies, and I'd see her through the bathroom door, taking out prescription bottles, putting different pills in from Ziploc bags in her handbag, putting the original bottles back. My chest went cold. When? October, November, December. Last time was the 21st, 3 days before Christmas. I wanted to say something, but you don't accuse family without proof. I told myself maybe she had permission. Maybe the doctor changed prescriptions and she was helping. But Christmas night, when Mrs. Florence was vomiting for 2 hours, his voice caught. That was my mother's face before she died. Bad medication. Someone had switched her pills at the nursing home. I knew what I was seeing. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I've known Clayton since he was 8 years old, Marvin said. Because I didn't want to believe it. Because I'm just the hired hand and their family. But if I stay silent and Mrs. Florence dies, I can't live with myself. He pulled out his phone. I took pictures, October, November, December, through the bathroom door crack. Dates are stamped. He handed me the phone. 4 photographs, crystal clear. October 19th. Margot's hands holding a pill bottle over the open medicine cabinet. Zipper bag visible on the counter. November 7th. Same setup, different angle. November 28th. Closer shot. You could read the prescription label. Florence Caldwell. Pain medication. December 21st. Margot's profile visible. Looking over her shoulder. Checking to make sure no one was watching. I kept thinking maybe I was wrong, Marvin said. Maybe she had permission. But Mr. Caldwell, nobody who has permission works that fast, checks over their shoulder that many times, or wipes down the bottles after touching them. That's not caregiving. That's crime. Sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is break 22 years of silence and say the truth everyone else is too afraid to speak. Airdrop these to me, I said, all 4. He did. I watched them transfer to my phone. Saved them immediately to 3 different cloud accounts. Will you testify? I asked. In court, when this goes to trial. Marvin looked me straight in the eye. 22 years, Mr. Caldwell. I've never spoken against this family. I've kept my head down, done my work, stayed loyal. But that woman, she's not family. She never was. And I'll testify to that in any court you need. I shook his hand. Thank you. He nodded and walked back toward the barn. I stood in the freezing warehouse looking at the photographs on my phone. 4 images spanning 3 months. Dated. Time-stamped. Clear view of Margot's hands, the medicine bottles, the zipper bags, her face checking for witnesses. They'd covered the main security cameras, adjusted the angles, deleted the logs. But they never thought about the old farmer with the hidden barn camera, or the quiet farmhand with the smartphone. Now I had video evidence from outside the house, photographic evidence from inside, phone records proving medical fraud, Florence's journal documenting symptoms, the guardianship papers showing premeditation. The case was building, piece by piece, document by document, witness by witness. But I still needed to find where they were getting the poison and how they were paying for it. Because money always leaves a trail. And people who plan murder this carefully always make one mistake: they think they're smarter than everyone watching. The 3 receipts were dated exactly 1 week apart. October 15th, November 15th, December 15th each for $282.33 each, described as soil treatment supplements. Each a lie. I sat in the warehouse financial office at 9 that night, going through Clayton's company spending account. Marvin's photographs were secure. The barn footage was backed up. I had witnesses' video paper trails proving fraud, but I needed the source. I needed to prove what they used. The spreadsheet showed 3 entries from Agrichem Supply Inc. Rochester. October 15th, $282.33. Soil treatment supplements. Carbonex Pro. November 15th, $282.33. Soil treatment supplements. Carbonex Pro. December 15th, $282.33. Soil treatment supplements. Carbonex Pro. Total $847. 40 years managing this farm. I'd never ordered from Agrichem Supply. Never heard of Carbonex Pro. I Googled the product name. Carbonex Pro veterinary antiparasitic for livestock use only. Not soil treatment. Not agricultural. Veterinary. I clicked through to the safety sheet. Warning: toxic to humans. Oral ingestion causes severe gastrointestinal distress, hypotension, confusion. Symptoms mimic organic illness or medication side effects. What kind of monster sets up monthly automatic poison deliveries, like it's a Netflix subscription? I photographed the receipts, screenshot the safety sheet, texted Judge Thornton at 9:47 p.m. Found it. 3 purchases. Veterinary poison disguised as farm supplies. Sending photos. My phone rang at 10:16. Ernest's voice was sharp. "That's it," he said. "That's what poisoned Florence. The signature matches Dr. Moss's findings. I'll call her tonight, tell her what to test for. We'll have confirmation December 29th morning." 48 hours, I said. "Can you hold—" I looked at the dates. October 15th, November 15th, December 15th. Monthly intervals. Same amount, same product. They set up a subscription to poison my wife. "I can hold," I said. The next morning at 10, I walked into the living room and found Dr. Reeves sitting in my armchair. Florence was on the couch. Clayton stood by the fireplace. Margot sat near the window, hands folded, perfect concerned expression. This was the appointment from Clayton's calendar. December 27th. Evaluation for guardianship. But they weren't looking at Florence. They were looking at me. Margot spoke first, voice soft, trembling. "Achotorni. Dr. Reeves, I need to tell you something. I'm worried about my father-in-law. He's been acting paranoid, accusing me of terrible things, going through our private documents, talking to himself in the barn." Clayton nodded. "Dad's been under stress. Mom's illness has been hard on him. He's not sleeping, obsessing over conspiracy theories. Last week he grabbed me in the hallway, accused me of stealing, wasn't making sense." Dr. Reeves turned to me, eyes clinical, assessing. "Mr. Caldwell, have you been experiencing increased stress, trouble sleeping, racing thoughts? Your family is concerned about your mental state." I stood in the living room of the farm I'd built and became a psychiatric suspect in my own home. Florence looked confused, worried. "Wendrick," I said, calm and controlled, "I sleep fine. I've been managing this farm and my wife's care for months. If my son is concerned, he can discuss it with me directly." Dr. Reeves pulled out an evaluation form, started taking notes. For me, not Florence. They were trying to institutionalize both of us. If they declared me incompetent, my testimony meant nothing. My evidence meant nothing. I'd be the delusional old man while his devoted family tried to help. The hardest battle isn't proving you're right. It's staying silent when they call you crazy, knowing the proof is 2 days away. Margot continued. "He's been going through bank statements, making accusations. Doctor, I'm scared of what he might do." I said nothing, kept my face neutral, breathing steady. Lab results arrived December 29th. Less than 48 hours. I just needed to hold position. Dr. Reeves asked more questions. Sleep patterns, stress levels, relationship with Clayton, whether I felt persecuted or misunderstood. I answered calmly, reasonably, every word measured. Florence watched confused why the doctor was asking me questions instead of examining her. After 20 minutes, Dr. Reeves closed his folder and stood. Mr. Caldwell, I'll be submitting my evaluation to the county by December 30th. I understand. He shook Clayton's hand, patted Florence's shoulder, nodded at Margot, looked at me last. Clinical assessment. Neutral. Then he left. The room was quiet. Margot looked at me. Small smile. Satisfied. Checkmate. She thought she'd won. I did the math. Doctor submits December 30th. Lab results arrive December 29th morning. Judge Thornton has direct line to county prosecutor. I smiled back at Margot. Genuine smile. Her smile faltered. Everything all right, Dad? Clayton asked. Fine, I said. Just fine. I walked out. Down the hallway, out to the warehouse. 3 more days. They'd spent months building this. Poisoning Florence. Falsifying records. Tampering cameras. Planning to institutionalize both of us. They'd thought of everything. Except the old farmer who'd spent 40 years learning patience. Learning to wait for the right moment. Learning that the best trap is the one your enemy walks into thinking they've already won. December 29th, lab results would arrive. December 30th, the doctor would submit his evaluation calling me paranoid. But by December 30th, the prosecutor would already have the evidence. The receipts, the video, the photos, the medical fraud, the poison. By then it wouldn't matter what the doctor thought, because by then everyone would know what Clayton and Margot had done. I stood in the warehouse looking at the farm through the window. The land my grandfather started. The land my father expanded. The land I'd protected for 40 years. 3 more days. Then I'd show them what it means to try to steal from a man who spent his whole life defending what he loves. Florence's scream cut through the afternoon quiet. I ran to her bedroom and found her on her knees beside the bed staring at the beige carpet. Butterscotch, the old farm cat, was vomiting blood-tinged foam. The cat's body trembled, pupils dilated, breathing labored. A juice glass sat on the nightstand, half empty. Margot had brought it up an hour ago. "Oh God, Leonard," Florence whispered. "The cat. I left the glass on the floor when I went to the bathroom. He must have drunk from it." I knelt beside her, looked at the cat, looked at the symptoms: trembling, vomiting, dilated pupils, blood-tinged foam. "That's exactly what I've been feeling every morning," I said quietly. Florence turned to me. Her face went white. "For weeks," I continued. "Every time Margot brings me coffee, every time she makes me breakfast, this is what it feels like." "No," Florence said, but her voice had no conviction. She was looking at the cat, seeing what I'd been trying to tell her. "I thought you were becoming like your father, paranoid, seeing threats that weren't there. I needed you to see it yourself," I said. "I knew you wouldn't believe words." Florence's hands were shaking as she picked up the juice glass, held it to the light. "She brought this to me 20 minutes ago, said I needed to stay hydrated. I took 1 sip and it tasted strange. I was going to pour it out, but then the phone rang and I left it." The cat's breathing was labored, shallow. Whatever Margot had put in the juice, it had hit him fast, a 15-pound animal absorbing a dose meant for a human woman. His eyes were glazed. He wasn't improving, just like Florence hadn't been improving for months. "He needs a vet," I said. "Tonight." Florence looked at me with the face of someone who finally understands something she'd refused to understand. The cat wasn't going to be fine, and neither was she if I hadn't switched that glass. "What do we do?" Florence asked. I stood up, helped her to her feet. "We wait," We pretend. 3 more days until the lab results arrive December 29th. Until then, we act like nothing changed. You still trust Margot. I'm still the paranoid old man they convinced the doctor to evaluate. Can you do that? Florence looked at me. 41 years of marriage in that look. 41 years of trust I'd almost lost by not trusting her enough to tell her the truth sooner. I can do that, she said. Family trust once broken is the hardest thing to rebuild. Yet here we stood, Florence had believed a cat's vomit when she wouldn't believe my words. Sometimes evidence speaks louder than testimony. Sometimes the truth needs a witness who can't be accused of paranoia. I met Dwight Prescott in the supermarket parking lot at 4 that afternoon. Cold December wind cut through my jacket. His car was running heat on. I climbed into the passenger seat. Florence called me, he said. Told me what happened with the cat. Told me she finally understands. She does, I said. Then we moved to phase 2. He pulled a manila envelope from his briefcase. But first there's something you need to know. Something Florence made me promise never to tell you. I waited. Saw 15 years ago my law firm was bankrupt. Banks wouldn't touch us. I was 3 weeks from losing everything. Florence lent me $80,000 from her family inheritance. Made me promise not to tell you because she said you had enough on your shoulders running the farm. She never told me, I said. She made me swear. I paid back every cent by 2019 with interest. But Clayton doesn't know about the loan. Doesn't know it was repaid. He thinks I still owe your family a massive debt. Dwight opened the envelope. These are farm management transfer papers. They look legitimate. They're not. They have deliberate legal flaws that invalidate them. Why give them to me? Because you're going to sign them tonight. You're going to let Clayton think he's won. And when he tries to submit them to the bank or file them with the county, they'll be rejected. But the attempt will be documented. Proof of coercion. Proof of fraud. He'll have incriminated himself trying to use fake papers. I looked at the documents. Professional letterhead. Legal terminology. They looked real. Looked if he submits them. Dwight said, we'll have evidence he tried to seize control through fraudulent means. Combined with the poison evidence arriving December 29th, you'll have everything you need. Let him think he's won, I said. Exactly. Sometimes you surrender a field to winter, not because it's dead, but because spring requires the dormancy. Strategic retreat looks like defeat until the season turns. That evening, Clayton and Margot came to the living room. The fake papers were on the coffee table in front of me. Dad, Clayton said, we need to talk about the farm. You can't manage it anymore. It's time. I looked at him, at my son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the man who'd negotiated his mother's murder for $200,000. I took a long pause, let my shoulders sag. Acho, you're right, I said. My voice was tired, defeated. I'm tired. Margot leaned forward. This is for the best, Leonard. You and Florence can finally rest. We'll take care of everything. I picked up the pen, signed the papers. The scratch of ink on paper sounded loud in the quiet room. Take care of it, I said, pushing the papers across the table. Clayton took them. His face showed satisfaction, victory. He thought he'd finally won control of everything 3 generations had built. For a moment, watching my son's triumph, I almost broke character. Almost told him everything. Almost tried to reach the boy he used to be. But that boy was gone. Clayton stood. Put the papers in his jacket like a man who'd just closed the deal of his life. Good night, Dad, he said. Good night, son, I said. And I meant it. Because I wasn't sure how many more there'd be. I slept 2 hours that night. Woke at 5:30. walked through darkness to the warehouse office while Clayton and Margot still slept in the main house believing they'd won. I rewound the warehouse camera footage for the third time, watching Margot's designer handbag change from heavy to flat in 9 minutes. The camera was mounted above the cold storage entrance. I pressed play on the Christmas Eve footage. Timestamp 8:22 p.m. Margot's SUV pulled into the side lot. She got out carrying a small designer handbag, the kind that cost more than a week of farm wages. The handbag hung heavy against her hip, sagging with the weight of something inside. She walked to the kitchen door, disappeared inside. I fast-forwarded, waited. Timestamp 8:31 p.m. She emerged. Same handbag. But now it hung flat and empty against her side. Whatever she'd carried in the capsule, the compound was gone. Used. Dissolved into warm milk waiting on the counter. 22 minutes later, she carried that milk toward Florence's wheelchair. The milk I'd switched. The milk now locked in Judge Thornton's evidence locker with lab results arriving tomorrow. I saved the footage to 3 drives. Uploaded it to the cloud account Clayton couldn't access. The video was dated, time-stamped, showed clear chain of custody for the poison. I had her. What does it say about love, that you can watch someone poison your wife on a screen and still remember teaching your son to ride a bike? Still remember the day he brought Margot home to meet us, the way he looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered. I turned off the monitor and drove Florence to Rochester. Dr. Sarah Brennan had been Florence's private physician for 12 years. She practiced in a small clinic 40 miles from the farm, completely separate from the Mayo system where Dr. Vance worked. No connection to Clayton or Margot. No connection to anyone who might have been influenced by their careful documentation of Florence's supposed decline. Florence sat in the examination room while Dr. Brennan reviewed her latest blood work. I'd had it drawn 2 days ago at the same private lab Judge Thornton used, the same lab that was analyzing the milk sample. Dr. Brennan looked up from the computer screen. Her face was serious. "Now, Florence, she said, there's a compound in your bloodstream that shouldn't be there." "What do you mean?" Florence asked. "Something foreign. Not from any of your prescribed medications. It's causing the GI symptoms you've been experiencing. The blood pressure drops, the dizziness. Everything you've been attributing to the cancer treatment." Florence's hand found mine, squeezed hard. "How is that possible?" she asked. Dr. Brennan looked at me, then back at Florence. "Someone has been introducing a toxic substance into your system," she said. "Deliberately. Over an extended period. The compound signature suggests agricultural or veterinary origin. Carbonex Pro specifically. It's used in livestock. It's highly toxic to humans." The room was quiet. "I need to file a report," Dr. Brennan said. "This is attempted murder. The authorities, Not yet," I said. She looked at me sharply. "Leonard, someone is poisoning your wife. I know, and I have proof. Video evidence, financial records, witnesses. But if we file now, they'll destroy everything they can before law enforcement moves. They'll claim it was accidental. They'll say I'm a paranoid old man making false accusations." Dr. Brennan studied me for a long moment. "How long have you known?" 5 days. "And you've been gathering evidence?" "Yes. What do you need from me?" 2 more days, I said. "Lab results arrive tomorrow morning with court-admissible chain of custody. I have a judge coordinating with the county prosecutor. On January 1st, I'm calling a meeting. Everyone who needs to see the evidence will be there. Family, lawyer, bank manager, witnesses. I want this done right, done publicly, done in a way they can't deny or destroy." Florence squeezed my hand again. Validation and horror in that single gesture. We'd both been right to be afraid, but we'd also been right to wait, to build the case, to make sure the truth couldn't be buried. Dr. Brennan printed the blood work results, signed them, sealed them in an envelope. Sakita January 1st, she said. But if anything happens before then, if Florence's condition worsens, you call me immediately. I'll have this report ready to file the moment you give the word. But nothing's going to happen, I said. Florence knows now. She's not taking anything from them anymore. We just need to hold position for 48 hours. We drove back to the farm in silence. Florence stared out the window at the December landscape. Bare fields, gray sky, everything dormant, waiting for spring. They have the fake papers, she said finally. What if Clayton tries to file them before January 1st? Then he proves intent to commit fraud, I said. Either way, we have him. January 1st, Florence repeated. Why wait? If the lab results come tomorrow, why not act immediately? Because I want everyone there, I said. Every stakeholder, every witness, every person who might have believed their story about my mental decline or your incompetence. I want them all in one room when the truth comes out. I want there to be no doubt, no room for manipulation, no way for Clayton to spin this as family drama or misunderstanding. The annual farm meeting, Florence said. The annual farm meeting. I confirmed. 30 years we've held it the 1st of January. Every major decision, every financial report. This year they'll see something different. This year they'll see the truth. This year they'll see everything. I pulled into the farm driveway. Clayton's truck was gone. Probably at the bank, I thought. Probably trying to file the fake papers right now. Let him try. Every attempt was more evidence. Every move they made tightened the trap. Tomorrow, December 29th, the lab results would arrive. Proof that the milk was poisoned. Proof that Carbonex Pro had been in Florence's system for months. But I would wait 2 more days, because I didn't want to just prove they'd tried to kill my wife. I wanted everyone who mattered to see it with their own eyes. Clayton's hand shook as he refreshed the bank portal for the 3rd time. The farm account still showed my name alone. I knew he'd check the moment he woke up. I'd been counting on it. 24 hours since I'd signed those papers. 24 hours for him to believe he'd finally won. Margot found him in his office at 2 that afternoon. I heard her voice through the thin wall that separated the outbuilding from the warehouse where I was pretending to inventory supplies. What's wrong? She asked. The account. Nothing changed. He signed the papers. I filed them this morning. The account should show transfer of management authority. Maybe the bank hasn't processed it yet. It's been 9 hours. I called them. They said they received the documents but couldn't process them. Template issue, they said. Legally invalid format. Silence. Then Clayton's voice quieter. He knew. Dad knew these papers were fake. That's not possible. He's not senile, Margot. He signed them knowing they were worthless. He let me think I'd won. Then we don't wait. Margot's voice went hard. Clinical. We file the guardianship petition tomorrow, December 29th. Emergency hearing, before he can prepare anything else. What if he's already prepared? No answer to that. A farmer doesn't chase the fox stealing chickens. He watches where it runs, learns the den, then closes every exit but one. I'd been watching Clayton and Margot for months, documenting their movements, recording their purchases, building the cage they thought they were building for me. I left the warehouse and drove to Judge Ernest Thornton's house. He lived in a modest split level on the edge of town. Retired from the federal bench 3 years ago, but still consulted on complex cases. We'd known each other 30 years, served on the county planning board together, attended the same church until my knees got too bad for kneeling. He answered the door holding a coffee mug. "Come in," he said. Lab results arrive tomorrow morning. Dr. Moss called me an hour ago. The specific Carbonex Pro test came back positive. Court-admissible chain of custody. We have everything. We sat in his study, mahogany desk, law books lining the walls. A lifetime of knowing how justice actually works versus how people think it works. Tomorrow, I said. December 29th. The evidence completes. But I want to wait until January 1st to reveal it. The annual farm meeting, every stakeholder, every witness, the bank manager, the lawyer, the neighbors who've known us for decades. I want them all there when the truth comes out. Before I tell you when I really started suspecting them, if you're still with me, comment A. If you think I should have acted the moment I noticed something wrong, or B, if waiting to build the case was the right call, and add one short reason why. Quick note. The next part includes some recreated details to convey the emotional weight of the timeline, but the pattern of preparation is what matters. Ernest studied me over his mug. You've known since September, he said, that you'd need all this evidence, the camera footage, the financial records, the witnesses. You started planning this 3 months before Christmas Eve. You've known since longer, I said. Farmers always know when soil is wrong. Just takes time to test it proper. He nodded slowly. What did you see in September? Teacher Margot asked Florence about life insurance, I said. Casual conversation over dinner. Do you and Dad have good coverage? Have you updated the beneficiaries recently? Florence thought she was being thoughtful, planning ahead. But I saw Margot's face when Florence said the policies were paid up $200,000 each beneficiary's current. She was calculating. She was planning. That's when I knew. Not the poison yet. But I knew something was coming. So I started preparing. Came to you in late September. Told you I needed to protect assets. Needed legal oversight ready to move fast if I ever called you. And I've been coordinating with the prosecutor's office ever since, Ernest said. Quietly, no formal investigation, just readiness. So when you finally brought me the evidence, we could move immediately. The guardianship papers were dated December 15th, I said. Notarized. Ready to file. They'd been planning for at least a month before that. Maybe 2. But I'd been planning longer. Ernest looked at me with something like recognition. Not pity, not sympathy, understanding. This isn't an old man fighting back, he said quietly. This is a chess player who's been setting up the board for months. You let them think they were hunting you. But you were hunting them the whole time. I'm a farmer, I said. I know how to wait for harvest. Tomorrow the lab results arrive. January 1st you want the family meeting. Yes. And if they file emergency guardianship tomorrow, then the prosecutor moves immediately, arrests them before the hearing. But I'd rather wait. I'd rather do this publicly. Let everyone see what they did. Let there be no question. No room for sympathy or doubt. What if Clayton runs? He won't run. He thinks he still has a chance. He thinks his father is a confused old man who got lucky with some fake papers. He doesn't know about the cameras, the witness testimony, the financial forensics. He doesn't know how completely he's lost. Ernest set down his mug. You've been 3 steps ahead this entire time. 4, I said. I'm always 4 steps ahead. That's how you survive 40 years farming. You don't react to weather. You prepare for every season before it arrives. I stood to leave. January 1st, Ernest said. Annual meeting. I'll make sure the prosecutor is ready to move the moment you give the signal. Thank you, Leonard he said. When this is over, when they're arrested and charged, when everyone knows the truth, your son is still your son. That doesn't change. I know, I said, but I didn't know if that made it better or worse. I drove home as the December sun set over frozen fields. Tomorrow, December 29th, the lab results would arrive. Proof that Carbonex Pro was in Florence's system. Proof that the milk had been poisoned. Proof that my son and his wife had spent months trying to kill my wife for money. But I would wait 2 more days, because I'd been waiting since September, and I'd learned that patience isn't weakness. It's the sharpest weapon I own. The text arrives at 9:04 p.m. while I sit in my pickup outside the dark barn lab. Confirmed intentional compound chain of custody complete. Call when ready. Ernest. I read it 3 times before my hands remember how to grip the steering wheel. Carbonex Pro. The lab isolated the exact formulation. Not accidental contamination, not environmental exposure, deliberate poisoning with a compound that matches the receipts Dwight Prescott photographed from Clayton's warehouse office. The milk sample I collected Christmas Eve stored in Judge Thornton's evidence locker with documented timestamps linked directly to the 3 chemical purchases totaling $847. The chain of custody runs clean my collection Judge Thornton's storage laboratory analysis under court seal. No gaps. No questions about tampering or cross-contamination. The kind of evidence that survives cross-examination because every step followed protocol designed for criminal prosecution. I sit in the cold cab, watching my breath fog the windshield. Behind me, the barn stands silent. 42 years I've walked those aisles at dawn. 42 years of knowing which boards creak, which stalls need extra bedding in January, which cows prefer the corner feeder. Margot poisoned Florence with something she got from my own son's warehouse, fed it to my wife in our kitchen, and smiled at Christmas dinner while Florence pushed food around her plate with hands that trembled from nerve damage. The phone buzzes again. Meeting tomorrow, 7 a.m., my chambers. Dwight confirmed available. Time to discuss next steps. I text back, I'll be there. Then I sit in the darkness for another 20 minutes, letting the proof settle into my bones. First time in 3 months, my hands stop shaking not from fear or uncertainty, but from the simple knowledge that proof isn't hope anymore. It's ammunition. Judge Ernest Thornton's chambers smell like old law books and the kind of coffee that's been sitting on the burner since 5 a.m. I arrive at 6:55 December 29th, find Dwight Prescott already seated across from Ernest's massive oak desk. The attorney looks like he hasn't slept, tie-loosened reading glasses perched on his forehead, yellow legal pad covered in notes. Leonard. Ernest gestures to the empty chair. Dwight and I have been reviewing the timeline. I sit. Outside the window, Millbrook's Main Street shows the first hints of dawn. The hardware store won't open for another 3 hours. The diner's getting ready for the breakfast crowd. Normal people doing normal things while we sit here planning how to expose a woman who poisoned her mother-in-law for property and insurance money. Dwight taps his legal pad. The evidence package is complete. Lab results, chemical receipts, phone records showing the insurance fraud calls, veterinary testimony about the cat guardianship documents, proving intent to institutionalize Ruth, and the photographs I took, showing Clayton's knowledge of the warehouse purchases. Any prosecutor in Minnesota would move forward. Question is timing, Ernest says. We can file charges today, have Margot arrested by New Year's Eve, or we can wait. I lean back in the chair that's probably older than my marriage. Annual meeting is January 1st. Dwight frowns. The farm meeting, Leonard, this is a criminal case. You don't need to stage a confrontation. 30 years we've held that meeting. I keep my voice level. First day of January every year since I took over the operation from my father. Sit down with family and key partners, review the previous year's finances, discuss the coming season's plans. Tradition that matters in this county. Ernest studies me with the same expression he wore in 1994 when I testified as character witness for my neighbor in a boundary dispute. You want them there. Both of them. You want witnesses. See, I want it on record. I meet his gaze. Not just legal record, community record. Margot poisoned Ruth in our home. Clayton helped her plan it, and they smiled through Christmas dinner 3 days ago, while Ruth could barely lift her fork. When I file charges, I want everyone who matters to this farm to know why. Not rumors they hear at the feed store, not gossip from the church ladies. The truth spoken in the place where farm business gets decided. Dwight sets down his pen. You understand this is irregular. Most families want to handle these situations privately. Most families don't have daughters-in-law who commit attempted murder over dairy property and insurance settlements. I pull the printed lab results from my coat pocket, lay them on Ernest's desk. She made it public when she started asking neighbors about my wife's mental competency. Made it public when she filed fake guardianship papers. Made it public every time she smiled at Ruth across the dinner table while poison accumulated in her system. Ernest picks up the lab report, reads the highlighted section about Carbonex Pro concentration levels. The meeting's at what time? 10 a.m. kitchen table, same as always. I'll be there, Ernest says. Official capacity, Dwight. Prosecutorial witness, Dwight confirms. We'll need statements from everyone present for the evidence record. I stand. Outside, full daylight now. The hardware store's owner is sweeping the sidewalk. A harvest isn't when you pick the crop. It's when you've prepared the barn, sharpened the tools, and chosen witnesses who'll remember the yield. Thank you both, I say. Ernest nods. See you January 1st, Leonard, 10 a.m. I drive home thinking about tradition. About how the annual meeting has been the anchor of this farm's calendar for 30 years. How Margot attended her first one in 2019, sat at my kitchen table with fresh coffee, and Clara's cinnamon rolls asked intelligent questions about crop rotation and equipment depreciation. How this year's meeting will be the last thing she attends as a free woman. I sit beside Florence's bed at 3 p.m. December 29th, with my hands folded in my lap, trying to find the first word that will unlock everything I've protected her from for 3 months. She watches me from the pillow, eyes clear in a way they haven't been since September. The colors coming back to her cheeks. Her hands rest steady on the quilt, no trembling, no weakness. Dr. Reeves was right about the recovery timeline once the poison stopped. You've been planning something, she says. I can always tell. I need to tell you what's been happening. I take her hand. All of it. No protecting you this time. So I tell her. The capsule I found Christmas Eve. The glass switch at dinner. The September phone calls about life insurance that started my investigation. The warehouse camera footage showing Clayton and Margot together. The chemical receipts Dwight photographed $847 for Carbonex Pro compound. The fake guardianship papers designed to institutionalize her. The lab results that came through last night confirming deliberate poisoning with complete chain of custody. Florence doesn't interrupt, doesn't gasp or cry or turn away. She holds my hand and listens to every word like she's taking testimony in a courtroom, never breaking eye contact. When I finish, silence fills the bedroom. Outside the window, the December afternoon light slants across snow that fell last night. 40 years we've shared this room. 40 years of morning coffee and evening prayers and the kind of quiet that comes from knowing someone so completely you don't need words to communicate. How long have you been carrying this alone? She asks. The question breaks something in my chest. Since September. 4 months. She squeezes my hand. 4 months you watched our son and his wife try to kill me, and you investigated it alone because you thought you had to protect me. You were sick, I couldn't. I'll be there, Florence says. Tomorrow, the annual meeting. I'll say what I saw. The drinks that made me dizzy. The way Margot smiled when I couldn't remember things. The cat. Her voice steadies. We're not going to a nursing home, Leonard. Not like this. Not because they decided our life's work was worth more than our lives. I try to answer, but the words won't come. Instead, something else comes: tears that I've been holding back since Christmas Eve, since September. Since the first moment I realized my own son was part of this. Not tears from fear or grief. Tears from discovering that even after 40 years of marriage, I can still underestimate the strength of the woman who built this farm beside me. First time in 3 months, I allow myself to cry, not from despair, but from the simple relief of learning I was never as alone as I thought. Florence reaches up and touches my face. We'll do this together. Like everything else. Why? Dwight Prescott's office at 8 p.m. smells like old paper and the kind of trust that takes decades to build. He spreads documents across his desk, legal-size pages marked with yellow tabs and careful annotations in his precise handwriting. The will was amended September 12th, he says. Same week you called me about the insurance investigation. I lean forward. What kind of amendment? Automatic disinheritance clause. He taps the relevant paragraph. Any heir who intentionally causes or plots to cause harm to you or Florence loses all inheritance rights immediately upon proof of intent. Not subject to probate dispute. Not subject to appeal. Ironclad. The words take a moment to settle. They forfeit everything. The farm, the equipment, the livestock, the bank accounts, everything transfers to the alternate beneficiary structure we established. Dwight removes his reading glasses. The clause activates the moment their intent is proven. Tomorrow's meeting provides that proof with Judge Thornton as witness. I study the amended will, dated September 12, 2023, signed by me and notarized by Dwight's paralegal. They never asked to see the new version. Hi. They assumed you weren't smart enough to change it, Dwight says quietly. Assumed a dairy farmer from rural Minnesota wouldn't think to protect his legacy with legal instruments. They made the same mistake people have been making about farmers since my grandfather's generation. Confused simple living with simple thinking. Outside his office window, Millbrook's main street shows Christmas lights still up on the lampposts. In 2 days, those lights will come down, and the new year will begin. The year Margot planned to have Florence institutionalized, the farm transferred to Clayton's management, and me sidelined as the grieving husband too old to make decisions. The year she'll learn that patience and planning don't require a law degree. Thank you, Dwight, I say. He nods. See you tomorrow, Leonard, 10 a.m. Oh. December 30th at 10 p.m. I walk the farm perimeter alone. Every fence post I set with my father in the 70s. Every barn board I replaced after the windstorm in 98. Every field that Florence and I worked from March planting through October, harvest year after year, building something that would outlast us. The air cuts cold and clean. Stars overhead show the kind of clarity you only get in Minnesota winter when the temperature drops below 20 and the sky turns into a mirror. My boots crunch through snow that fell yesterday, covering tractor ruts and feed paths in fresh white. My grandfather built this farm in 1927 with $200 borrowed dollars and a handshake deal on 40 acres. Survived the Depression by keeping meticulous records and defending every inch when the bank came calling in 32. My father expanded it in the 50s, doubled the acreage, modernized the equipment, taught me that legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you protect. Now it's my turn. 3 generations don't build a farm with luck. They build it with soil tested every spring, fences checked every fall, and the willingness to defend what you grew when someone decides it's easier to take than to earn. I sit on the fence behind the main barn where I used to sit with my father on summer evenings, discussing the next season's plans. The farm spreads quiet around me. 42 years I've walked these fields. 42 years of honest work. Tomorrow, I'll do what my grandfather did in 32 when the bank came for his deed. He laid out the property papers, the receipts, 40 years of honest work, and told them one thing: try to take it. I'll be here. Tomorrow I'll do the same. But the threat isn't the bank this time. It's my own son. The first guest arrives at 9:52 a.m. January 1st, 8 minutes early, stamping snow from boots at the barn office door. I converted this space 10 years ago, insulated walls, long oak table that seats 16, fireplace that burns oak splits from our own timber. The kind of room where serious farm business gets decided. Through the window, fresh snow falls steady across fields that look the same as they did when my grandfather first cleared them. Marvin Harrington comes in first, the bank manager who's handled our accounts since 2008. Then Judge Ernest Thornton, moving slowly because of the hip surgery last spring. Dwight Prescott arrives with his leather briefcase, nods, once takes the seat I indicated yesterday. Two neighboring farmers, the Halversons from the east section, the Mitchells from the north property line, the feed supplier from Millbrook, the equipment dealer who sold us the new baler in 2021. Florence sits beside me at the head of the table, wearing the blue dress she saves for church and important occasions. Her hands rest steady on the table. No trembling, no weakness. The woman who decided 3 days ago that we'd face this together. Clayton and Margot arrive at 10 past 10, brushing snow from their coats. Clayton wears a suit unusual for him. Margot has her hair pulled back severe, dressed like she's attending a board meeting in Minneapolis instead of a farm gathering in rural Minnesota. They take seats near the middle of the table, and I watch Margot lean close to Clayton, voice barely a whisper, but audible in the quiet room. "He looks tired," she says. "Good. Let him say whatever, nobody will believe him." Clayton touches her hand briefly, the gesture of a man reassuring his partner that the plan is working. I pour coffee for Tom Halverson, the neighbor who helped me rebuild the north fence after the storm in 2019. "Coffee's fresh," I say. "Florence made it this morning." "Appreciate it, Leonard." Tom wraps his weathered hands around the mug. 31st year for this meeting, isn't it?" 31st. I confirm. The room fills. 16 people around the table, all looking at me expectantly. This is how it's always started, me at the head, reviewing the previous year's finances, discussing next season's plans, asking for input from people who understand Minnesota dairy farming, because they live it daily. Clayton clears his throat. "Thank you all for coming," he says, voice carrying the practiced tone of someone who's rehearsed this moment. "Dad wanted this meeting, so here we are." Several people nod. I notice how smoothly Clayton positioned that, making it sound like I requested their presence out of need rather than strategy, making himself sound like the dutiful son accommodating his father's wishes. I looked at them, observing their performance. It was a play where everyone on stage believed the script, except for me, the only one who knew how it ended. I sit perfectly still, hands folded on the table, and let the room settle into the kind of silence that precedes important announcements. At 10:20, Clayton stands. He places a folder on the table. Professional, organized, the kind of presentation materials that signal serious business planning. Opens it to reveal charts, spreadsheets, projected growth numbers printed on quality paper. I want to start by acknowledging something we all know but haven't said openly. Clayton begins. His voice carries confidence without arrogance, concern without condescension. Dad's given 40 years to this farm. 40 years of early mornings and late nights. 40 years of putting everyone else's needs before his own. Heads nod around the table. Truth mixed with manipulation, the most effective kind of lie. But the last few months have been difficult. Clayton continues. Mom's health challenges, the stress of managing a major operation at 67, the weight of decisions that affect not just our family, but everyone whose livelihood connects to this farm. He gestures toward Marvin, toward the equipment dealer, toward the neighbors. I've spoken with several of you individually over the past few weeks. You've seen the signs, the fatigue, the missed appointments, the confusion about basic operational details. Margot looks down at her hands, the picture of a concerned daughter-in-law who wants only what's best for her husband's struggling parents. What I'm proposing today, Clayton says, pulling out the top sheet to reveal a full-color presentation of the modernization plan, is a transition that honors Dad's legacy while securing the farm's future. I'll take over active management not to push Dad aside, but to support him. To take this burden off his shoulders so he can focus on Mom's recovery and his own well-being. He walks through the numbers: equipment upgrades, herd expansion, partnership opportunities with regional processing facilities. Every point supported by data, every projection reasonable, every recommendation sounding like wisdom from a son who understands both agriculture and modern business practices. Tom Halverson nods slowly. The feed supplier makes a note on his phone. Even Judge Thornton looks neutral, giving no indication of the conversation we had 4 days ago in his chambers. Clayton's been conditioning them for weeks, I realize. Not days or months, weeks of careful conversations, planting seeds of concern about my mental state, positioning himself as the responsible next generation, ready to preserve what I built. The whispered comment from Margot wasn't arrogance. It was accuracy. They prepared this audience thoroughly. The modernization plan I'm proposing will secure the farm's future for the next generation. Clayton concludes. It will honor everything Dad built while adapting to economic realities he shouldn't have to navigate alone anymore. He closes the folder. Looks around the table. Several people look sympathetic, understanding, ready to support a son taking care of his aging father. A trap isn't what catches prey. It's what makes prey think they're safe until the moment they're not. Clayton sits down. The room holds the kind of respectful silence that follows earnest presentations. Everyone waiting for me to respond with the gratitude and relief of a tired old man being offered help he desperately needs. I let the silence stretch. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Then I look at my son and speak for the first time since the meeting began. Are you done? Clayton blinks. Yes. Good. I lean forward slightly, hands still folded. Now sit down. I have a few things to add. The room's energy shifts like air pressure dropping before a storm. Clayton remains seated, but his posture changes, shoulders tensing, confidence fracturing at the edges. Margot's eyes narrow. Judge Thornton watches me with the expression of someone witnessing exactly what he expected to witness. Tom Halverson sets down his coffee mug. The small sound echoes in the sudden stillness. I stand slowly, pushing back from the table without notes or papers, and walk to the front of the room where Clayton displayed his modernization charts. Turn to face 16 witnesses sitting at the long oak table. The fireplace crackles. Snow continues falling outside the window. I fold my hands and begin. Don't talk to threesome. My grandfather bought 2 acres in 1932 with money he'd saved for 8 years, I say. Worked construction in Minneapolis 6 days a week, came home Sundays to clear timber and dig fence posts by hand. Built the first barn with lumber he hauled on a truck he borrowed from a cousin who didn't expect to see it returned. Tom Halverson shifts in his seat. The kind of story every farmer in Minnesota knows, variations of the foundation generation that built something from nothing through work that would break most people. My father expanded it through the Depression and the war. I continue. Doubled the acreage in 1956. Installed the first milking equipment in '63. Taught me that legacy isn't what you inherit. It's what you protect for the people who come after. Clayton's jaw tightens. Dad, we all know the history. Can we Sit down. I don't raise my voice. I'm not finished. He freezes halfway out of his chair. Margot touches his arm, but her eyes have shifted to Judge Ernest Thornton sitting quietly in the corner, taking notes on a legal pad. Florence and I took over in 1981, I say. 42 years of building on what my grandfather started. 42 years of honest work. No shortcuts. No lies. No poison. The word lands like a stone dropped in still water. Which brings me to why we're really here today. I pull the small remote from my pocket, the one that controls the screen I mounted on the wall last week, telling Clayton it was for reviewing equipment catalogs. The screen lights up. Warehouse camera footage timestamp visible December 24th, 2023, 8:22 p.m. This is the warehouse security system Clayton doesn't know exists, I say. Installed last September by the same company that handles the bank's cameras. Watch the timestamp. The footage shows Margot entering through the back door handbag noticeably flat. Shows her disappearing into Clayton's office. Shows her emerging 6 minutes later with the handbag full bulging at the sides. Marvin Harrington, our senior farmhand, who has watched over this property for 22 years, nodded slowly as he recognized the footage for fraud investigations a dozen times. Piece 2. I click to the next image. 3 receipts photocopied and enlarged. Chemical purchases from Clayton's warehouse. 3 separate transactions totaling $847 for Carbonex Pro compound. Clayton's signature on each requisition form. Dates November 1st, November 18th, December 8th. I let that sit for 5 seconds before continuing. Piece 3. Laboratory analysis of the milk sample I collected Christmas Eve. Confirms Carbonex Pro presence. Chain of custody maintained by Judge Thornton from collection through testing. The lab report fills the screen, official letterhead, highlighted conclusions, technical language that still makes the findings clear, deliberate contamination with industrial chemical compound. A house built on solid foundation stands through storms, but poison poured into the foundation doesn't crack the walls, it rots them from inside until the whole thing collapses at once. Piece 4. Florence's blood test from December 26th, verified by Dr. Sarah Brennan, her private physician. Dr. Brennan's report confirms the presence of Carbonex Pro, contradicting the false evaluation provided by Dr. Marcus Reeves on December 20th. Piece 5. The screen shows guardianship documents. Pre-drafted papers declaring Florence mentally incompetent, granting Clayton power of attorney over farm assets and medical decisions. Dated for filing January 4, 2024. Found in Margot's office desk drawer on December 18th. The room has gone completely silent. No coffee cups moving, no shuffling papers. Just 16 people watching evidence accumulate like snow building into drifts. Piece 6. Nursing home reservation confirmation. Millbrook Extended Care Facility. Room reserved November 10, 2023 in Florence's name. Reservation made by Margot Caldwell. Confirmation email forwarded to Clayton's warehouse business account. I click to the next image. Piece 7. Audio recording from December 20th, captured by the phone I left on the kitchen counter while Clayton and Margot discussed Christmas Eve plans. I press play. Clayton's voice comes through the room's speakers, tinny but unmistakable. Just don't put too much in the glass this time. We need her functional enough to sign if the lawyer asks questions. Margot's chair creaks. Clayton has gone pale. Piece 8. Testimony from Marvin Harrington regarding phone calls made to him in September by Margot inquiring about life insurance policies and procedures for claiming death benefits on farm property. Marvin documented those calls per bank fraud protocol. Marvin nods slowly. I can confirm that testimony, he says quietly. And Piece 9. I turn to Florence. She stands hands steady on the table. I saw our cat drink from a juice glass Margot left on the kitchen counter Christmas Eve, Florence says. Her voice doesn't waver. Same glass she'd poured for me earlier. The cat vomited blood within 20 minutes. Our veterinarian, Dr. Susan Brightwell, confirmed chemical poisoning. The cat died December 26th. Our eyes meet for 1 second. 40 years of partnership, building the farm together, raising Clayton together, facing this together. The evidence matters, but this moment matters more. The moment when she steps forward as witness instead of victim partner, instead of patient, showing everyone in this room that we survived what they tried to do. These 9 pieces of evidence, I say, turning back to the full table, document a systematic attempt by my son Clayton and his wife Margot to poison Florence, institutionalize her under false guardianship, and take control of farm assets valued at $2.4 million. The attempt began in September with planning and reconnaissance, escalated in November with chemical procurement and nursing home arrangements, culminated Christmas Eve with direct poisoning. I set down the remote. Judge Thornton has reviewed all evidence. Dwight Prescott has prepared documentation for the county prosecutor. Chain of custody is complete. Every piece is authenticated. The room holds its breath. Snow falls outside. The fireplace burns. Then one sound breaks the silence. Margot's chair scraping backward against the wooden floor, harsh and loud, as instinct tries to find an exit that doesn't exist. Margot stands from her chair, spine straightening composure, returning like armor being rebuilt in real time. She smooths her blouse, and when she speaks, her voice carries controlled courtroom tone. "This is manipulation," she says, gesturing at the evidence screen. A sick old man afraid of losing control, twisting circumstances to paint his family as criminals. These are circumstantial coincidences strung together by paranoia. She looks around the table at neighbors, the bank manager, suppliers. I want my lawyer. This is harassment. Several people shift uncomfortably. For a moment, it almost works, the reasonable professional defending herself against an elderly farmer's confused accusations. Then Judge Ernest Thornton stands. "I'm Judge Ernest Thornton, retired federal district court," he says quietly. "Served 23 years handling organized crime and conspiracy cases. I've been coordinating this investigation for 3 months. The evidence has been authenticated under federal chain of custody protocols I personally supervised." Margot's face goes pale. The side door opens. A woman in her early 50s enters gray suit, leather briefcase, prosecutorial presence. Catherine Sullivan, county prosecutor for Wright County, walks to the front steadily. "Shaidiku, Catherine Sullivan, county prosecutor," she says. "Judge Thornton coordinated with my office on December 29th. We reviewed the evidence package and signed the arrest warrants on December 29th, immediately after the lab results were confirmed. They have been waiting for my signal to execute. 2 officers are outside. The charges are ready to execute." Margot looks from judge to prosecutor to me, then to Clayton, who's staring at the screen where the audio recording is paused. His own voice frozen on "Don't put too much." The mask cracks. Not dramatic, just a small fracture where confident professional dissolves into woman realizing every exit is blocked. "Clayton," she whispers. But Clayton isn't looking at her. He's staring at the evidence screen with hands that have started to shake. My son sits motionless, staring at the recording timestamp, December 20th, 2023. The conversation in the kitchen while planning Christmas Eve. The moment he said those words without knowing a phone was recording, without knowing his father was 3 steps ahead. He knew, Clayton whispers. The whole time he knew. The realization isn't panic. It's something deeper. understanding that every conversation since September, every reassuring phone call, every time he thought he was managing the situation, he was walking over a trap already sprung. That his father wasn't confused or declining, that the old dairy farmer was sophisticated enough to build a federal-quality criminal case without a single misstep. Then Clayton turns and looks across the room at Florence. She sits beside me, hands folded, wearing the blue dress she saves for important occasions. The woman he tried to institutionalize. The woman he helped poison. His mother. Their eyes meet. Florence doesn't speak, doesn't accuse or condemn, just holds his gaze with steady witness that says more than words. 40 years she raised him. Now she sits as the woman who testified about watching the family cat die from poison meant for her. Clayton's face collapses. He drops forward onto the table, face in hands, shoulders shaking. "Mom," he starts. I never meant." But the sentence dies, because there's no way to finish it that isn't a lie. He did mean it. He planned it. He signed requisition forms and discussed dosing and recorded nursing home reservations for a woman who wasn't sick yet. Florence says nothing, just watches her son break. "Chitu." Catherine Sullivan opens her briefcase and pulls out charging documents. Her voice shifts into prosecutorial mode, clear, precise, official. "Hi, Tsium. Margot Fontaine Caldwell. You're charged with attempted murder in the first-degree elder abuse with intent to defraud and conspiracy to commit felony assault. Clayton James Caldwell, you're charged with conspiracy to commit harm, elder financial abuse, and accessory to attempted murder." The side door opens. 2 police officers enter Millbrook Sheriff's Department, handcuffs ready. County Jail. Bail hearing Monday morning. Catherine continues. The first officer approaches Margot. She doesn't scream or resist, just bows her head as handcuffs lock around her wrists with a metallic click that echoes in the silent room. First time in the entire story she's been completely quiet. No explanations, no counter-arguments, no charm. Just a woman in handcuffs being led toward a door that only opens one direction. The second officer approaches Clayton. My son stands slowly, hands shaking, offers his wrists without protest. The handcuffs close. He's led toward the door behind Margot, stops at the threshold, turns back. Our eyes meet across the room. Father and son. 40 years of building something together that ended when he decided property was worth more than people. He opens his mouth like he wants to say something, apology, explanation, accusation, but nothing comes out. Then he steps through into the gray January morning, snow still falling. Temperature below 20. Cold that cuts through coats and settles into bones. Dwight Prescott stands. The will amendment from September activates upon documented proof of intent to harm, he says quietly. We have that proof, the recordings, the chemical receipts, the guardianship conspiracy. The disinheritance clause is now in effect under Minnesota probate law. Criminal conviction will confirm it, but the civil protection activates today. All rights to farm assets, property, and financial accounts are void. Catherine nods. We'll need that documentation for the fraud case. Already prepared, Dwight says. I watch through the window as Clayton is placed in the patrol car. Head bowed, hands cuffed behind him. The son I raised. The man who tried to kill his mother. A harvest doesn't feel triumphant when what you're reaping is your own son being led away in handcuffs through snow. The patrol car pulls away, tires crunching on gravel. Tom Halverson leaves first, nodding once before stepping out. Then the others one by one until only Florence and I remain at the long oak table where we've held farm meetings for 31 years. The fireplace still burns. Coffee sits cold in cups. The evidence screen glows with the last image chemical receipts with Clayton's signature. Outside, the patrol car disappears around the bend. The last thing I saw was Clayton's back through the rear window, hunched, defeated, vanishing into the gray Minnesota morning. Just his back, nothing more. The son I built a legacy to protect, now the threat I had to remove to save it. Victory looks different when the battlefield is your own family. Feels different too. Like winning and losing became the same thing the moment the handcuffs closed. Florence reaches across the table and takes my hand. Her grip is steady, strong. The woman who survived what they tried to do. The partner who stood beside me through 42 years and will stand beside me through whatever comes next. The room empties. The patrol car is gone. All that remains is silent snow and the hollow weight of justice that cost everything to achieve. 4 people sit in the empty meeting room with cold coffee and the weight of what just happened, pressing down like Minnesota snow on barn roofs. The guests left an hour ago. Tom Halverson nodded once before stepping out. The feed supplier didn't make eye contact. Marvin Harrington shook my hand and said nothing, the kind of handshake that acknowledges things too complicated for words. Now it's just me and Florence at the long oak table, Judge Ernest Thornton by the fireplace, Dwight Prescott gathering documents into his leather briefcase with careful precision. The room smells like burnt oak and coffee that's been sitting too long. Outside, snow continues falling. Inside, silence fills the spaces where accusations and arrests happened 3 hours ago. Ernest walks to the cabinet, where I keep a bottle of whiskey I've had since 2015 gift from a neighboring farmer when his son graduated college. Pours 4 small glasses without asking. Sets one in front of me, one in front of Florence, keeps one for himself, slides one to Dwight. Florence pushes hers away. Takes water instead from the pitcher that's been sitting since the meeting started this morning. Her hands are steady. No trembling. The woman who survived poisoning and testified against her own son doesn't need whiskey to process what happened. Dwight sips sets it down. Trial will likely be spring, he says quietly. Catherine Sullivan is thorough. She'll build the case methodically. Margot faces 15 to 20 years if convicted on all charges. Clayton's charges are lesser conspiracy accessory. Probably 8 to 12 depending on how much cooperation he offers. Cooperation, I repeat. The word tastes wrong. If he testifies against Margot, the prosecutor might negotiate reduced sentencing. Dwight pulls out a legal pad covered in notes. The will amendment is ironclad. Both are disinherited regardless of trial outcome. Farm assets, property, financial accounts, all protected. Florence looks at me across the table. The same look she gave me 42 years ago when I told her I wanted to buy the Mitchell property everyone said was overpriced. The look that asks questions without words. How long were you planning this? She asks. I set down the whiskey glass I haven't touched. Since the day I noticed the dog barking. Ernest looks up. Dwight stops writing. Before September, Florence says. August 20th, I say. Middle of the night. Our dog started barking at the kitchen window. I came downstairs, found Margot standing at the counter with the refrigerator open. She said she couldn't sleep, was getting water. But the dog kept barking even after she went back upstairs. Dogs don't bark at family members getting water. They bark at threats. The room holds its breath. Getty, that's when I started watching. I continue. Noticed small things. Your vitamins in different order. Juice glasses rinsed but not run through the dishwasher. The way Margot asked about your doctor appointments like she was tracking something. Then the insurance calls in September. That's when I called Ernest. Florence studies me for a long moment. 42 years of marriage means reading silences better than most people read words. You should have told me sooner, she says. I know. We could have faced this together from the beginning. I know. She reaches across the table, takes my hand. Her grip is firm. No more protecting me from things I need to know. No more, I agree. The whiskey sits untouched in front of me. 40 years building something. 3 months protecting it in secret. 30 minutes this morning destroying my family in front of 16 witnesses. And now, complete silence where my son's voice used to be, where it's been for 33 years, ever since he first said Dad, in the kitchen of the house we built together. Ernest stands slowly the hip that needed surgery last spring, making him wince. You did what needed doing, Leonard. That doesn't make it easier. But it was right. Dwight closes his briefcase. I'll file the estate protection paperwork tomorrow morning. Everything will be legally sealed by end of week. They leave through the side door Ernest's truck, starting with the rough idle it's had since November. Dwight's sedan pulling away smooth and quiet. Florence and I sit at the table until the fire burns low and the room grows cold. At 9 p.m. I sit in my office with the phone in my hand, staring at the number Dwight gave me for county jail inmate calls. The room is dark, except for the desk lamp Florence bought me in 1998 when I complained about reading seed catalogs by overhead light. I dial before I can change my mind. The phone rings 4 times. On the 5th ring, Clayton answers. Yeah, just one word, flat, empty. It's me, I say. Silence. Not the silence of someone who hung up, the silence of someone still there, but with nothing to say. Not calling to gloat, I continue. Calling because you're still my son. Whatever happens next, that doesn't change. More silence. I can hear him breathing. Somewhere in the background, jail sounds doors, closing voices echoing off concrete. Why are you calling? Clayton finally asks. Because you're my son. Your son who you just had arrested. My son who tried to kill his mother. The words land hard. True things often do. Another long silence. Then Clayton's voice comes back different. Smaller. Younger. Did she hurt Mom? He asks. Actually hurt her. The question stops me cold. The way he asks it like he's not sure. Like maybe he thought it was theoretical. Planning that never quite crossed into understanding the real harm being done. Yes, I say. The poisoning caused nerve damage, trembling hands, memory problems, weakness that kept her in bed for weeks. Dr. Reeves said another month, and the damage would have been permanent. How do you tell your son he's still loved through a county jail phone, when the reason he's there is because you put him there? How do you explain that protection and prosecution can come from the same place from 42 years of building something worth defending? I wait for Clayton to respond, to explain or apologize or rage, anything. Instead, the line goes dead. Not the click of someone deliberately hanging up, just the sudden silence of a call ended without ceremony. I hold the phone long after the dial tone starts. Hold it like it might come back to life. Like if I wait long enough, my son's voice will return and say something that makes this bearable. But the line stays dead. Outside my office window, snow falls on the farm my grandfather built with borrowed money and stubborn faith. January 1st, 2024. The day I saved everything I'd built and lost the person I built it for. Dwight Prescott spreads 3 documents across the table showing assets Florence thought she knew the farm property, the equipment inventory, the operating accounts. Then slides a 4th document showing the one she didn't. We sit in his office the morning after the arrests, Florence beside me in the leather chair she sat in maybe 5 times in 42 years. The office smells like old law books and coffee strong enough to strip paint. Outside the window, Millbrook's main street is quiet. January 1st. New Year. Most businesses closed. Florence picks up the 4th document, reads the header twice, looks at me. You never told me about this LLC, she says. The document shows Caldwell Agricultural Technologies Limited Liability Company, registered in Minnesota in 2017. Primary asset patent rights to advanced milk filtration system developed from modifications I made to standard dairy equipment over 15 years of trial and error. Current valuation $800,000. Sole owner Florence Marie Caldwell. Set it up 7 years ago, I say. After Tom Halverson's cousin got taken to court by his own kids over farm assets. Watched that family tear itself apart in probate while the lawyers got rich. Decided that wouldn't happen to us. Dwight taps the document with his pen. The patent generates licensing fees from 3 regional dairy operations. Automatic deposits to a separate account Florence can access independently. If anything happens to Leonard death incapacity legal action, the LLC structure protects it completely. Can't be touched by creditors, inheritance disputes, or criminal proceedings. $800,000, Florence says quietly. The filter system reduces bacterial contamination by 43%, I explain. Increases milk quality grades, reduces waste, extends equipment life. 3 operations pay annual licensing fees. Been running since 2018. Florence sets down the document. Looks at me with an expression I've seen maybe a dozen times in our marriage, the look that comes when she realizes something important happened while she wasn't watching. You've been protecting me longer than I knew, she says. Not an accusation, just a fact. The kind of truth that settles into the space between people who've shared 42 years. Protecting us, I correct. In case something like this happened. In case I got sick or died or couldn't defend what we built. You'd have resources nobody could take. Dwight closes his briefcase. With the will amendment disinheriting Clayton and Margot, the farm assets remain with you and Florence jointly. The LLC remains Florence's alone. Total protected value just over $3 million. Florence stares at the LLC document, realizing I built safety nets she never saw. Not because I didn't trust her, but because protecting the people you love sometimes means carrying weight they don't know exists. Building foundations they can't see until the ground starts shaking. Thank you, she says finally. 2 words that mean for the protection, for the foresight, for carrying this alone. So I wouldn't have to worry, for being the kind of man who plans for disasters hoping they never come. You're welcome, I say. 2 words that mean 42 years, and I'd do it all again, every secret plan and silent preparation, every weight carried alone. Because that's what protecting means, when the people you're protecting are worth more than everything you're protecting them from. I returned to the farm at 2 p.m. The patrol car took Clayton away yesterday morning. The meeting room is clean now. Florence washed the coffee cups, put away the chairs, swept the floor where snow tracked in, making the space normal again through the kind of methodical work that heals wounds words can't reach. Marvin Harrington stands by the main barn, checking the door latch that's been sticking since November. He looks up when my truck pulls in. We exchange nods. No words. The kind of communication that happens between men who've known each other 30 years and understand that sometimes presence speaks louder than conversation. Thought I'd check the operations, Marvin says. Make sure everything's running. Appreciate it. Florence, okay. She's strong. Always has been. He nods once more, climbs into his truck, drives away with the courtesy of knowing when to leave a man alone with his land. I walk to the warehouse where I keep my work boots, the ones with cracked leather and oil stains from 42 years of daily chores. Pull them on. The left one is worn more than the right because I favor that leg when lifting feed bags. The laces are frayed. Florence offered to buy new ones last Christmas. I said these still work. The barn smells like hay and livestock, and the particular mixture of dust and manure and old wood that every dairy farmer knows as the scent of home. I walk down the center aisle, checking water troughs, feed levels, the small maintenance tasks that never stop regardless of what else happens. Then I hear the sound pause, scrambling on concrete tail, thumping against the barn wall. Our old farm dog bursts through the door, 11 years old, with gray around his muzzle and arthritis that makes him stiff in cold weather. But none of that shows now. He runs in wide circles around my boots, tail wagging so hard his whole back end moves, making the high whining sound that means, "Welcome home, I missed you, everything's better now that you're here." "Yeah, I'm home," I say, bending down to scratch behind his ears. "Still here." He licks my hand, circles again, presses against my leg with the full weight of unconditional loyalty that doesn't care about arrests or evidence or sons in county jail. Just knows I'm here, and that's enough. A tree doesn't survive Minnesota winters by fighting the cold. It survives by roots going deeper than the frost line, holding on when everything above ground looks dead. By spring, when the thaw comes and everything else is still frozen, those deep roots are already drawing water, already preparing for growth. Nobody can see yet. I saved the farm, lost my son, exposed the poison, protected Florence with LLCs and patent rights and will amendments, built a case that led to arrests and trials and family destruction. But what tells me I'm truly home isn't any of that. It's the dog running circles around my boots the same way he has for 11 years, unchanged, unconditional, uncomplicated. Some bonds don't need evidence or explanation. They just know. Florence sits up in bed January 1st night and asks the question I've been preparing for since Dr. Reeves confirmed the poison was clearing her system. Say, what's the treatment plan now? Not, what's next? Or should we schedule something? The directness of someone who's spent 3 months being poisoned and wants to face whatever comes next with eyes open. I'm sitting in the chair beside the bed, the same chair I pulled close on Christmas Eve. The bedroom smells like lavender soap and faint antiseptic from medical supplies Dr. Reeves left. Best hospitals, I say. Best doctors. Now that the poison's gone, we can get accurate assessments, real treatment plans. Florence looks at me with eyes clearer than they've been since September. Colors back in her cheeks. Her hands rest steady on the quilt. 3 weeks ago, those hands trembled so badly she couldn't hold a coffee cup. I've been researching, I continue. Mayo Clinic in Rochester, 2 hours from here. MD Anderson in Houston if we need specialists. There's an oncologist in Minneapolis, Dr. Sarah Kemper, who pioneered new treatments for your type. Success rates 40% higher than standard protocols. I pull out the notebook, where I've been writing names, numbers, success rates. Started this list in September when the diagnosis came through before I knew about the poison. Leonard. Florence starts, and I hear the tone, the one that precedes, "Don't spend so much or we can't afford that. Money can be made again." I say, cutting her off gently. "You can't." The same words I said at Christmas. The same promise. But then it was spoken before I knew about the poison in her system, before I understood that cancer wasn't even her biggest threat. Now it's spoken after I stopped the poisoning, after I arrested our son, after I did everything necessary to give her a chance at survival. The weight is completely different. Florence opens her mouth, closes it, looks down at her hands, the hands that work again, that don't shake anymore. "The 800,000 from the patent LLC, I say quietly. That's yours. Use it for treatment. That's why I set it up. Not for retirement for this. For keeping you alive." She looks at me for a long time. 42 years means reading silences, and this silence says I want to argue about cost, about being sensible. But I can't argue anymore because I finally understand what you've understood all along. Some things matter more than money, more than pride, more than the farm or any of it. "How long have you been researching these hospitals?" she asks. "Since the diagnosis, since September. Before you knew about the poison?" "Yes. You were preparing to fight both." I was preparing to fight whatever tried to take you from me, I say. Turned out there were two enemies. Cancer I can't arrest, but poison I could stop. So I stopped it. Now we fight the one that's left. Florence reaches across the space between bed and chair. Takes my hand. This time she doesn't argue about cost. Doesn't suggest cheaper alternatives. Doesn't try to be practical or sensible. Just accepts that her husband will do whatever it takes to keep her alive. I almost lost you, I say. Not to cancer, to poison, every day for months. Watching you get weaker, knowing what was causing it, knowing I couldn't tell you until I had enough evidence. Her grip tightens. But you didn't lose me. I'm still here. We're still here. Yes! And we'll fight the cancer together. Like we should have been fighting the poison together if you'd told me sooner. The gentle rebuke lands exactly where it should. No more protecting you from things you need to know, I promise. No more, she agrees. She settles back against the pillows. Doesn't let go of my hand. Just holds it, her grip steady and warm and alive. A Mayo Clinic, she says. How soon can we get an appointment? Stuck on to. Dwight has connections. He's making calls tomorrow, probably within the week. Good. One word carrying weight. Acceptance. Partnership. Understanding that we're in this together now. No more silent protection. No more carrying burdens alone. Florence's breathing evens out. Slows. Her grip on my hand relaxes slightly but doesn't release. She's falling asleep, the kind of sleep that comes when you stop fighting and start trusting. I don't move from the chair. Don't let go of her hand. Just sit in the quiet bedroom, listening to her breathe. In, out, in, out. You don't know what sound matters most until you almost lose it. Not words or laughter or any of the noise that fills days. Just the quiet rhythm of someone breathing beside you in the dark. The proof that they're still here, still alive, still fighting. I built evidence packages and coordinated investigations and presented 9 pieces of documentation that led to arrests. Spent 3 months planning the exposure of my own son. Protected assets worth over $3 million. But this moment, sitting in a dark bedroom, listening to Florence breathe, this is what it was all for. Every piece of evidence, every silent morning watching her grow weaker, every strategic decision to wait instead of confronting immediately, every moment of carrying that weight alone, all of it led here, to her breathing, to her surviving, to the simple miracle that she's still beside me when she so easily might not have been. Her hand goes slack and mine sleep, taking her under. I don't move. Don't adjust position even though the chair is uncomfortable. Just hold her hand and listen to each breath. In, out, in, out. Small miracles. Each one. Every single breath that almost wasn't. The farm is protected. The poison is stopped. The evidence is documented. Justice is being served. But victory isn't measured in courtrooms or bank accounts or protected assets. It's measured in this Florence breathing quietly beside me. Alive. Safe. Still here. Everything else, the arrests, the trial, the broken family, the destroyed relationship with Clayton, all of that is the cost of this moment. And I'd pay it again, every time, without hesitation, because some things matter more than everything else combined. She breathes. I listen. The night settles around us, and for the first time in 3 months, the weight lifts just enough that I can breathe too. The envelope arrives in late January with no return address, but I recognize my son's handwriting. I sit at the kitchen table where 16 witnesses gathered 3 weeks ago, the place where I exposed the betrayal. Florence scrubbed the table clean the next morning, but the memory lingers. The envelope is thin, containing a single torn sheet of paper. 3 lines in blue ink. The lawyer told me about the no harm clause. I understand why you put it there. I'm sorry about Mom. No signature, no date. It is a quiet acknowledgement from a son who finally understands, even if that understanding arrived too late from the wrong side of a jail cell. Maybe that is all some relationships become after you call the sheriff on your own child. 3 lines. I whisper to the empty kitchen. 42 years of history reduced to 3 lines. It isn't enough, but it is something. I pour coffee from the pot Florence made before her trip to Rochester. The Mayo Clinic accepted her case and treatment starts next week. Dr. Kemper, her oncologist, noted that the poison ironically masked the cancer's progression, confusing the timeline enough that the disease was caught in a more treatable stage. It is a dark irony that the very thing meant to kill her may have helped save her life. Outside, the farm runs without Clayton for the first time in decades. Marvin checks the operations, and a neighbor's nephew helps with the equipment. The fields are indifferent to grief courtrooms or unanswered letters. Spring is coming to Minnesota, and with it the slow, stubborn fight for recovery. In late spring, I push Florence in her wheelchair toward the east pasture. She insisted on coming outside, tired of hospital ceilings and sterile rooms. Dr. Kemper approved, noting that her strength is returning in small, steady increments. "Slow down," Florence says. "I want to see all of it." The east pasture is wide and green. In the middle of the field, 5 newborn calves run in wide circles, testing their legs, completely unbothered by the darkness of the previous winter. Florence offers a real smile, not the brave mask she wears for doctors, but the genuine look I fell in love with 42 years ago. "They're beautiful," she says. "Life keeps going, doesn't it?" "Yeah," I reply. "Whether we're ready or not." Clayton remains in county jail awaiting trial. Margot faces nearly 2 decades behind bars. The farm is legally secure, protected by the will amendments and LLC structures I spent months perfecting. Florence is alive, fighting, and hopeful. I saved what I could and lost what I had to. Was it worth it? I look at Florence, feel her hand in mine, and hear her steady breathing. Yes, every time. Without question. You do not protect what you love with grand, dramatic gestures. You protect it by showing up, by doing the ordinary, unglamorous work of checking the fences and refusing to look away when things go wrong. That is all I did. I chose her life over family peace. I would make that same choice again without hesitation. Home is not where everything works out perfectly. It is where you keep working despite everything. It is where you stand when the ground finally stops shaking, choosing every morning to protect what matters most. This is home, this field, this woman beside me breathing, smiling, and alive. Everything else was simply the cost of keeping her here. And to you listening to my story, remember this protection isn't always loud. If I could go back, I would have told Florence sooner. I thought carrying the burden alone was protecting her, but she deserved to be my partner from the beginning. Don't make my mistake of thinking you have to fight battles in silence. The strongest protection comes from trust, not secrets. I learned that 3 months too late. When your family's safety is at stake, family justice isn't about revenge. It's about refusing to let harm continue. I believe God put me through this to show that justice doesn't require rage. It requires patience, evidence, and the willingness to do what's necessary, even when it costs you everything. Family justice means standing in the field every morning and choosing what matters most. Some people will never understand why I arrested my own son. But I protected the woman I loved for 42 years. That's the only justice that mattered. If this story made you think, leave a comment below. Tell me, would you have done the same? Would you have waited 3 months to gather evidence or confronted them immediately? If you know someone who needs to hear this message about standing up for those who can't protect themselves, please share it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Wise Revenge for more stories like this. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time means more to me than you know. One final note: certain details in this story have been adjusted for reflection and storytelling. Any resemblance to real people or situations is coincidental. What matters is the lesson, and I hope